In this video, I'm going to walk through creating a very simple Windows form application. This application begins with some specifications. We're going to build a pizza ordering app, very simple one. So the specifications say that the user should be able to select from one of three sizes, a small, medium, or large. User should be able to choose to add either 0, 1, or 2 additional toppings, and the user should be able to enter in the name for an order. And there are some prices associated with these inputs. Once all that is done, the user should be able to order a pizza, and we will print a receipt. And the receipt should contain the name of the order, which size was selected along with the price, which toppings were selected, the total cost of the pizza, tax, and final total. So when we build a graphical application, the first thing we need to do is decide which controls we are going to use, what is our form going to look like, what controls to use for inputs, what controls to use for the outputs. And what I have here is a very quick sketch of a possible solution. So here I have a list of radio buttons to choose to select the size. The reason I want some radio buttons is because radio buttons are linked together and will allow me to only select one of the three options. If I use checkboxes here, the user could check small and large at the same time, which doesn't really make sense. When it comes to toppings, I have two checkboxes. In this case, checkboxes do make sense because the user should be able to select one or both or neither. For entering a name, I just scribbled out a little text box here, and then I have a place order button. When they click the button, I have a rich text box that I want to just print the receipts in. Now there are many, many other ways you could design this application. This is just the way I have chosen. So once I have decided on my input controls, my output control, and how I'm going to, which control is going to generate the event that allows me to do my work, now I'm ready to build my application. So all right, let's see if we can do this. I start with my blank Windows form application, and I'm going to take my form and shrink it down a little bit so it's easier to manage. And then we need some controls. So the first thing we will deal with are the sizes. So I'm going to create a label, drag it onto my form, and I'm going to change this label 1 to say choose a size. Now in the properties window here, when I edit a property of my control in the designer view, the code that implements that property is going to be implemented in the form1.cs designer.cs file. Okay, close those for a moment. Now I need some radio buttons, so we're going to grab some radio buttons. Let's see if we can find them. I'm going to grab 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. My radio button 1 is going to represent the small pizza. So I'm going to find the text property here and just change the text from the radio button to say small. And maybe we'll put a little $sign next to it. For radio button 2, I'm going to change the text property to say medium. And that will be $9. And radio button 3 will be our large option. So we will say large, and that will be 11. Okay, next up we have toppings. So I'm going to grab another label, add it to my form, and then this label, I'm going to change the text property of label 2 to say choose topping. And now let's find some checkboxes. So I'm going to grab one checkbox, grab a second checkbox. Checkbox 1 will have some type of topping listed. We'll make it mushrooms. And checkbox 2, we will make another topping. I will call this candy corn. And then finally, the user needs to enter in a name. So I'm going to grab another label, put it over here, and we will call this label 3 enter name. And now to enter the name, I'm going to choose just a regular text box, control, right here. So the user can now choose a size, choose a toppings, enter in a name. Now I need an output control. For the output, because I want to output many lines of data, I'm going to select a rich text box. A rich text box allows me to output multiple lines. So we'll just put a rich text box in here. And then finally, I need a control to make all of the work happen. So we'll find a button, drag it on here, and I'll change the text property of the button to say place order. All right. Now for each of my controls, I try to provide enough information so that the user knows how to use my form. So I don't want to just put a text box with no label because the user will not know what to do. So I'm trying to tie my input controls with maybe some type of control that describes what's going on there. In fact, if I wanted to, I have this unknown text box, rich text box right here. Maybe I want to take a label and put it on top of the text box and just say receipt. So the user knows what's going on. All right. We haven't coded anything yet, but we've created a form with all of the controls that the user is going to be interacting with. Now I'm going to do just a couple little cleanup things. My form currently says form 1 at the top. Let's select the form, change the text property of form 1 to say pizza app. There we go. Now it's time to register an event for an event handler for this button. I want when the user clicks on this button to go through the process of reading the inputs, calculating the costs, and displaying the results. So to register an event for this control, I will single click the control, go to the events little lightning bolt here, find the click event handler, and I'm going to call this click order pizza. And when I hit enter there, what has happened is in the designer.cs file, we have registered this method to handle the click event on the button 1. And the shell of the method to handle the event was placed in the form1.cs class. Okay, one last thing I'm going to do is, if I were to run this program right now, we will see that the default condition of our form, well, here the default condition is setting the small radio button to be true. I was not expecting that. But if you wanted to, when we deal with radio buttons, you often want to make one option clicked by default. And so what we could do is that we could click on the small radio button, go to the properties, take the checked property and change that to true. So we know we want one of these radio buttons checked by default. We saw that one was, but now we've officially made the radio button of our choosing selected. Now let's talk about when the user clicks the button, what do we want to do? Well, the first thing we need to do is read and find out which size of pizza they chose. So we're going to read through each radio button and determine which one was selected. Then we want to read through the toppings and see if which of these are checked, and then add those costs to our total. And then we want to make sure that a name is entered. So having a valid name is one thing we must check for before our order can be placed. And so what I'm going to do is, inside our event handler, I'm going to list a couple tasks that we want to make sure that we implement. So one of the first things I want to do in my event handler is I want to clear old data. Okay, in the event that the user placed one order and I have old receipt data sitting here, when the user clicks place order again, I want to make sure that that old data is deleted before we start processing the new order. Otherwise, what might happen is the user enters in something wrong, we place the order, there's an error, and that old receipt data is just sitting there. It could be confusing to the end user. So I'm going to clear out the old data when our button is clicked. Next thing I want to do is I want to validate inputs. So here for example is where I might check that a name has been entered. Once all my inputs are validated, I can read through each input. We'll read through each input and do whatever we need to do based on those inputs. And then finally, I'm going to output my results. Okay, so this is just a general guideline that you can follow. It doesn't always make sense, but I think in this case, it's going to make sense. All right, let's start walking through the process here. Well, to clear out the old data, I'm going to put rich text box 1.clear at the top of my event handler. And if there was any old text in the rich text box, it is now going to be deleted. And we're going to add text back in as we go down, but we're going to get rid of the old stuff first. Second, let's validate some inputs. I want to make sure that the text box actually has a value in it. So I'm going to say, well, if textbox1.textProperty. Textbox1 is the control. The text property is what is the property of the text box that actually has what the user has typed stored. So I'm going to say, well, if that text box is equal to an empty string, then I'm going to pretend it's empty. So let's display a little a warning message here. So let's inform the user of the error. So I'm going to say messagebox.show, please enter a valid name. And then I'm going to return. I'm going to return from our event handler method early because there's no need for me to try to calculate the cost of the pizza if there's a missing piece of information. So as soon as I determine that the user has not given me everything I need, I'm going to exit, tell the user what's wrong, and then exit. Okay. And what we could do is we could do little things like textbox1.focus. And what focus will do is try to bring the cursor to the text box where the user needs to enter in a value. Now, I don't think there are any other controls that I need to validate here. Because we chose a default size, we know that because the radio buttons are linked together, one size will always be selected. The user does not have to select toppings to order the pizza, but they do need to enter a name. I think that's all we need to do here. So now it's time to calculate this cost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called cost, and I'm just going to initialize it to some starting value. And as we read through our inputs, we are going to modify this cost variable. So for example, let's check the first radio button. We're going to say if radio button 1 dot checked, make sure I spell it right. If the radio button's checked property is true, then I know that the cost of my pizza should be $7, right? And what I can also do is I can say to my rich text box, I can say append the size and the cost of this pizza. So we can say small pizza $7. Add a little new line at the end here. Oh, we were supposed to print the name first. So first thing I'm going to append to my rich text box is the name. Now I want to create a string with the user's name embedded. So I'm going to use the string.format method, which is going to allow me to build a string that I can insert a value into. So I'm going to say order for, make a little placeholder, and we will insert the textbox1.text value. And I don't want to forget a new line here. So first thing we're going to do is take the name that's entered into the text box, insert it into a string, append it to our rich text box, which starts empty. Okay, we have the order name. Now we ordered the pizza. But what if it's not small? We're going to say, well, else if radio button 2 is checked, if that value is true, then I know that my cost of the pizza should be $9. And in my rich text box, I'm going to append medium pizza, which was $9. And then finally, if the radio button 1 isn't checked and radio button 2 isn't checked, I know that the only other option will be that radio button 3 is checked. So I'm going to say else cost is 11. Rich text box, we will append the text large pizza. We'll make that 11 bucks. All right, so we've grabbed the username, we've grabbed the price of the pizza, and we're saving it to a variable. Now it's time for the toppings. Toppings will be 50 cents each, right? So if the checkbox one dot checked, if that button is checked, that means the user wants mushrooms on their pizza. So we're going to output, first let's increment the cost. I'm going to say cost is equal to the old cost plus 50 cents. And we're going to print this topping. So we're going to append a formatted output. Well, no, we don't even need formatted output. We're going to say add mushrooms. And this will be 50 cents. And we will say if the second checkbox is checked, that means they wanted candy corn. So we'll take the old cost, add another 50 cents to it, and append candy corn. Now something I want to highlight here. When I check the radio buttons, I'm using an if, else, because only one of these options can be true. It's either small or medium or large. But when I check the toppings, I want to make sure that these are independent checks. Both of them are just simple if statements. Because the second checkbox does not depend on whether the first checkbox is checked. Both of these can either be checked or unchecked. Any combination is valid. All right, we grabbed the cost, we chose the cost of the pizza, we have implemented toppings additions. Now it's time to just calculate and display the rest of the information. So I'm going to create a variable for the tax, and the tax is going to be the cost times 0.095. This is assuming a 9.5% tax, which is in the write-up. And then we'll say the total at the end is just the cost times 1.095. This is the same as saying cost plus tax. And let's display the results. So we're going to do some more rich text boxes with appends, and we're going to format some more strings. So I'm going to use string.format. I'm going to say the cost is equal to format and value as currency, and I want to insert the base cost value. Make sure I add a new line there. The append text does not give you a new line by default, so we have to add the lines. Next, we will append the tax. Say that's equal to the tax, and then finally we will append the total. Total is equal to okay, make those a little bit even, and that's my output. I can put that underneath my comment here. So walking through this solution, we just inside our single event handler, we're clearing out old data, checking our inputs, and then we start printing results and checking our inputs, checking our other inputs. So determining which radio button was checked, assigning a cost value as is needed, checking each topping, incrementing our cost as needed. Our cost variable, by the way, is an accumulator variable, right? It's growing as we go through our logic. So we are initializing it and declaring it kind of outside each of these if blocks. And then we just display the results. Let's see how this works. All right, where is it? Here we go. Here's our little pizza app. Let's try to place an order without a name entered, and we get an error message. Enter a valid name. So here we're going to enter a name. We'll say Hagrid. and we're going to place our order. We see that the order is for Hagrid, small pizza was selected, no toppings are showing, base cost is $7, tax and total. Let's choose a medium 1 topping pizza and we place our order. When I click the place order button, the old receipt was deleted and the new information was appended. So here we see a medium pizza and we see that the mushrooms were added. If we do large 2 toppings, we see the large pizza, both toppings are listed, total cost, etc. Now if I were to put in a invalid name and we have this old receipt, when I hit the place order, we get the error message, and because we cleared the old output at the beginning of our event handler, we don't have any kind of old misleading data just hanging out in the receipt. All right. I hope this illustrates how to build a simple Windows Form app.